Hey guys, this is Matt Talakiran from Abundant Acres out here in Eastern North Carolina. Robert asked me to do a little video on our experience with the FSA loan process that we've gone through, and I'd like to outline a few things that I've kind of thrown together to do justice to what I've learned, what we've gone through here at Abundant Acres. I apologize, it's kind of the first time I've ever done a small video, so if I'm not directly looking at the camera, I apologize. So, first off, I'd like to give you some context as to who we are, what we do, and why it's relevant that I give this video. So, we moved onto our farm in about November of 2016. It was a full build. I just recently, last week, retired from the Marine Corps, and our last set of orders were given to us in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and our farm is located near that base. And so what ended up happening is we arrived in North Carolina about middle of 2016, about April, and our home was being built at that time, or so we thought. The ground didn't break until after we were there for about a month. Why that's important is when you are deciding to pull the trigger on where you're going to be doing your farm, whatever size it is, you need to make sure that that's your first step, is that your land is solid in your hands. You don't want to be playing around with leases and renting or borrowing land unless that's part of your overall strategy for your farm. For us, because we knew we were retiring in North Carolina, we decided that it was going to be a good deal for us to make sure that we waited until we had that land, which is about 10.5 acres, Eastern North Carolina, about 11 miles from the coast. Now, that plays a role in our planning process because initially I thought we were going to get the home, and right away I thought we were going to get our loan knocked out. Well, a wrench got thrown into our plans because once we arrived in North Carolina, we were told that the home was already started to being built when the ground hadn't even been broken yet. So fast forward all the way to the end of October, beginning of November. This is after Hurricane Matthew had delayed our home build for another 3 weeks or so. We finally move into the home. Now, during this time, between April and November, I'd spent some time at the FSA, spent some time speaking to the NRCS folks, getting to know all the people there so that they've seen my face, they know my name. And I feel that having a relationship with those kind of people that kind of hold your farm in their hands is really important. So first off, I found out that let me get to a couple of the preconceived notions I had with the FSA loan process. At the beginning, and this is before I actually talked to them and went through the actual paperwork process. One, I thought it was just one lump sum of money that was all in one pot. I was mistaken with that. And that's a bad thing because my planning was towards one lump sum, and it ended up delaying my processing of my paperwork for over a month as I went into the weeds as far as the planning, and I'll get into that later. On a good note, it actually what I thought was going to be a very rigorous credit check process. I'll be honest, we hold a decent amount of consumer debt as most people do. But once we went through the process and finding out what that entails, our current income with my military retirement, and I work off farm currently, and all that is safe. We're good with the land and the property. I'm specifically talking about servicing the loan. So when we processed our paperwork and we were looking at getting a credit check and everything, one of the things I found out was that the credit check was simply that. All they want to know is that whatever plan you come up with, whatever money you're asking for from them, that you're still able to pay your bills with whatever non-farm money, non-farm income you have. If you go into them and you're saying, hey, I'm $30,000 in debt, I'm barely making ends meet right now. I collect cans on the side of the road, and, there's a high likelihood that I might be dipping into the funds that we ask for the farm to pay for my living expenses, then that's going to become a problem. Now, that only applies specifically to the microloan because they don't really do a deep dive check for the microloan. That's $50,000 and below total loan funds. Now, if you're talking about a farm purchase loan, I can't really speak intelligently on that because we didn't go that route. We self-funded our farm property through our own funds through the family. So moving along, I started detail planning roughly around January of 2017. In this, I'd say I kind of went a little overboard, but that was good for me in the long run. What you need to do when you say, hey, if we're talking about a microloan, you have to say, I need to know everything I'm going to purchase. This is the top down, bottom up, soup to nuts kind of list. I originally started out with getting 2 Farmer's Friend Caterpillar tunnels for our farm and literally decking that thing out with steel hit boards, everything to make that thing a hardened structure, and down to the cost of every single bolt. I had things down to the penny as far as our planning goes for our seeds, our hardware, our fuel and lubrication costs for some of our equipment, all of our equipment, estimated fuel it was going to cost to travel to garden supply stores that were too far away from us. All those things, literally, it was from A to Z, everything. So I knew what my costs were. And when I did that, I always over-exaggerated the costs in the majority of the things that could be fluffed as far as like, okay, cool, I'm going to run my tractor for, 3 hours each week. And that's going to turn into roughly X number of gallons of fuel that I'm going to use and X number of oil changes I'm going to have to do per year. I always fluff those numbers by at least 10 to 20% depending on the item. And we're talking compost, seeds, any sort of organic fertilizers and everything. And so that makes a difference down the line when you come into issues that I'll talk about later, when you hit speed bumps in your process and you have to really say, okay, what can I do without? What can I skimp here? What can I take away that still does not remove my ability to properly run my farm? If it's the difference between having 3 silage tarps to prep your farm, vice 1 silage tarp, and saving the money that you're going to be using for those 2 silage tarps for something that was more mission critical for your farm. It's good to know those things before you pull the trigger on spending that money. So a little bit more context. So we're Abundant Acres. You can find us at Tally Family NC on YouTube. It'll be the link that's included in here. We don't do a lot of videos. We've had a real rough year with the hurricane and some personal injuries that I had this last year. So we really didn't want to put a lot of videos out there, all the stuff that we weren't doing. So we are a 10.6 acre farm, coastal North Carolina. Our plan is to be a multi-species, soil-based, likely organic, and trending towards the regenerative organic certification that's probably coming out. So your mileage is going to vary on some of these things as where it concerns some of the issues that were brought up for us that are a little bit more context specific. We had egg birds, turkeys, mixed greens on our farm this last year, and some other mixed vegetables. We pretty much started with a clean slate this year because of the hurricane wiped everything that we had out. This coming year, we're moving into a significant amount more turkey. We're actually getting our broiler processing up to speed, and we're probably going to be bringing a few pigs on farm as a family project, but looking forward to making that a enterprise on the farm. But they weren't the pigs were not the pigs and the turkeys weren't included in the original farm plan. So I gave you a little bit of context of my career. I'm currently, about 5 days post-retirement ceremony, so I'm kind of on that high right now. But prior to actually executing my retirement, I actually solidified another job off farm, which is within my same career specialty. I'm an IT guy by trade, so it was really nice to have that follow-on income. I'll be doing that probably for the next 2 years while my wife finishes her RN degree, and the farm is going to be a side hustle. But because my schedule is relatively secure, employment is secure, I can really focus on all the time that I have to spend on farm with likely an increased amount of funds to our family finances and the ability to fast track some infrastructure projects that we were not able to get into the funding for the farm loan. My spouse also has a off-farm job here in North Carolina, which makes a considerable amount of money for what she does. And all those things play into how you're going to move on with your farm plan and being able to have buffers for all your finances, plans for plans, and backup plans for all of those plans. Really makes a big difference, and how well you plan allows you to make smart choices down the road if you have to divert from your original plan. Okay, back to the timeline. I started the detailed planning in January. And roughly about February 2016, we got the paperwork started. Now, at that point, I was pretty green to the process. I had spoke to the loan processor on the phone, but I really hadn't met them because they were 4 counties over and like nearly 2 hours away. So I didn't really have a chance to sit down and speak to them. But I did get a chance to speak to some of the other FSA people and start some relationships with them. One of them was the NRCS. I found out that, everyone, talks about all these NRCS grants, the high tunnel grant, the fencing, and the irrigation grants. One thing you have to know about those things is there's a timeline on those. I submitted our application in 2016 because we were we rated high points for the awarding of a high tunnel. We were told we were put on the backside, the things like, I'm a veteran, I'm a person of color, new farmer, everything. Those things kind of play into the fact as far as, who gets chosen to get these grants if there's a shortage on funds. What we were told was there was a possibility that we could get it for 2017, but it was more likely that we would be first of the line because we were put at the back of the line for 2017. We were put at the front of the line for 2018. What we ended up doing was not pulling the trigger on that. So that plays a big role in this. If you think that you're going to be using any of your equipment funds to for your microloan to pay for and then be reimbursed back the money for a NRCS approved high tunnel. So you really have to play that card very close to the chest, because if you mess that up, you're going to be obligating yourself for $8,000 or more, depending on what you want. And that's going to be a problem, because you'll either be $8,000 in the hole and owing somebody $8,000, or you're going to be $8,000 in your pocket and owing interest on that $8,000. So it makes a really big difference. First meeting was email. It was really cordial. I asked a lot of questions. I read everything I could find out about the loan process. I watched every video you could watch, and I still kind of messed it up. You want to know what questions you need to ask. How long does it take for processing on average? When is the peak times for processing? I'll get to that a little bit later. But you want to know those things so you know when you can start your process. Do not expect that you're going to go into the FSA office and you're going to be wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You're going to have your paperwork done in a week. It's going to be in their hands and processed, and you're going to have your money in 30 days. Get that out of your head right now. I would much rather have assumed that it would have taken at least a year delay for everything, than to think I was going to get the money ahead of time, because it really, our job is a seasonal job for the most part for anyone that's growing in soil and not, hydroponically with lights and everything. It makes a big difference because you can really put yourself in a pickle, and we did, and I'll get to that a little bit later in here. So, I didn't know all the questions I needed to know before I went in there, and I just asked as many as I could. Educated questions, uneducated questions. The best way I can say this is when you go to meet them for the first time, ask them, how do people screw this up? That's your best question you can ask, because they're going to tell you. Because it's easy to do the right things because they'll tell you what to do, but it's the things that you're going to screw up and do wrong that one will make your relationship with your loan processor a lot more difficult, and two, it makes them, it's in their eyes, it sees that you're being a proactive loanee, and that makes a big difference, because it makes a difference between, are they going to call you a week out from a deadline, or are they going to call you a month away from the deadline because they remember that story you told about the turkeys climbing on your sedan and pooping all over your hood, right? So make sure that you're in there, and you're trying to gain their trust, even though it's all cut and dry as to where if they're going to give you the money or not. But make sure you know that that makes a big difference. I actually made a really big impression on one of the loan processor ladies because I continued to ask about her husband who had passed away just recently. And that's not a thing that you do just because you want to gain their trust. It's just something I do personally with people. Call them by their name every time I see them, ask people their name, and everything. And that makes a big difference character-wise with them when in the way that they see you. They'll remember you. I'm like, oh, that guy's, his deadline for payment is in 2 months. Let me call him now and bug him a couple times. So it reminds him, because life happens. You get busy. I was an active duty Marine up until a week ago, and you have 24-hour duties that pop up, deployments, in the field exercises, non-field exercises that really take up your time and can really eat up a lot of those hours that you should be devoting to your farm. Problems with paperwork. I'm reading off of notes that I've written on my computer here. We had a lot of problems with paperwork. Signatures, just questions that I had no idea. There's a lot of boxes to fill in these and a lot of formulas that they use to determine if you rate to have a microloan, if you want a microloan or a large farm loan. It makes a big difference as to how well that goes. And when I get to the end of this, it makes more sense, especially when you're running tight margins. You have to show a loss, or you have to show that you weren't able to make good on your initial farm plan. And that makes a big difference because, numbers are not necessarily fudged, but it depending on how you tell the story on those numbers, it makes a big difference on how that looks on your final loan paperwork. I didn't lie at anything, but I was injured. We weren't able to pull a profit off of any of our products. And when you have to do some corrective actions on the backside, which is the majority of the reason why I'm doing this video, you have the tools at your disposal to plead your case. And that's the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, the USDA doesn't want to lose money on you. They want to do good by you as long as you're doing good by them. And if you fail and have to have all your stuff put on a truck and sold, they're losing out the wazoo. And then you lose because you owe the USDA a ton of money. And if they write you off, then you're never allowed to use the USDA for any other funds, even if you turn the farm around, a year later and you're turning a profit. You still have to pay all that money back, and it's a big hassle to deal with if you can avoid it. Ask questions. Ask all the questions. Bug the living daylights out of them. If you have a question, ask it. Try and get them all in like one email, point by point, so that they can go, okay, cool. Question 1, here's the answer. Question 2, here's the answer. Question 3, I don't understand what you're talking about. Please clarify. Makes a big difference because you're using up their time, and you are not going to be. You're one of a ton of people, regular conventional farmers that are all in there. They're all processing the same loan paperwork. So timelines mean a big difference here. Most of the people submit their loan processing paperwork at the end of the year, so it can be kind of done at the beginning of the year, and then processed so they can do their whole business come spring of that following year. And that makes a big difference, because if you do that wrong, you're going to owe them money sooner than you expect. And I'll allude to that coming up here. So the big difference between a micro and a large loan is, for the most part, if you can start your operation and then forward self-fund afterwards, get the micro loan. Get the micro loan and get as relatively little amount as you can. It's $50,000 total, and I think we finance about $47,000 for all of our equipment. That was a BCS tractor, $5,000 allotted for a 13x9 walk-in, all the bits and pieces of our Caterpillar tunnels, all of our equipment, all of our processing equipment. That was all in there. And we were able to stay underneath that $50,000 threshold. You go above that, and that's a conventional loan. When you get into above $50,000, you have to be denied by a creditor or a bank. You have to provide a lot more credit proof on your financial stability going into the business, because you're talking a lot of money at that point. It could be $55,000, not a real big difference, but most people, if they're going above a microloan, they're going way above a microloan. And then you start getting into the farm operating loans or the farm purchase loans, and that's well outside my scope of knowledge at this point. But I would suggest that you talk to your FSA coordinator or your FSA loan officer to ask them about how that is, how you go about that, and kind of the same principles I went through with ours will matter when you go and talk to them. In the same manner, like having a good plan, knowing your plan, doing the relationship thing makes a big difference. So I've got a few things. Before you start your paperwork, you need to have these things at least somewhere done in a very detailed amount. I mean, be anal retentive about it. The reason is, it makes sense for you down the road when you need to move things here and move things there to make something happen that you didn't plan for. Like, oh man, like for instance, for us, we have a terrible bacterial disease in our soil, which literally destroyed 500 tomato plants within a week. Great starts, put them in the ground. They thrived for about maybe a month, and then boom, all of a sudden within 2 weeks, we had 500 tomato plants all gone. That was literally our moneymaker for 2018. Done. All gone. Never going to go away. Come to find out that we have to use tomato grafting rootstock here to defeat this bacteria that's pretty much a death sentence for tomatoes here, grown in soil. So make sure you have that, because like for us, I found out that to get enough grafting seedlings for our tomato production, I'm going to nearly have to spend anywhere from $250 to $500, depending on the type of tomato rootstock I have to buy. That's a big difference. $500 is, I don't know how you are, but that makes a big difference in our farm. So that was unexpected, but I was able to make that up by pulling a few things back for our winter production for 2018 that didn't actually happen. You need to have a farm plan. It's going to be asked of you, what do you do? What are you going to grow? Okay? They need to know who you are. We're a multi-species, planning to be organic farm, specializing in market vegetables, chicken, eggs, and or poultry and eggs. Pretty much it. Equipment and supplies plan. This is where you need to be really detailed. Everything. One of the things that you have to understand going into this, and this is what I didn't know, and this is what kind of alludes to the whole $50,000 process, where we had I thought everything was coming in all in one lump sum, and I was going to get this 7-year payoff period for $50,000, and that really wasn't the case. Okay, so with the farm loan, the microloan, you have to understand that the microloan is split up into two different types of funding streams: equipment and supplies. Easiest way is the equipment, stuff that has a serial number, can have a serial number, or can be carted away on a truck and sold. Okay, it's the easiest way to explain it. This is tractors, high tunnels, Caterpillar tunnels, kind of. I had a little bit of a difficulty trying to explain to them what a Caterpillar tunnel was and how it was technically mobile and can be put up on a truck and sold if need be. Coolers, any other hard equipment like freezers, deep freezes, processing equipment like our poultry processing equipment, that would be considered equipment. I was able to finagle a chainsaw and a weed whacker, both commercial grade chainsaws and weed whackers, because we do have a lot of forest, and part of doing what we need to do means we have to clear a lot of area, and that makes a big difference. Now, your mileage may vary. My loan officer was able to make it work. But really, if it can have a serial number or has a serial number, that's pretty much the gold standard of the stuff. But usually smaller yard type equipment won't necessarily always translate into that. And also any breeding stock you might have. Now I know they spoke about pigs because I kind of did bring it up. They say, you know, if it's breeding stock, it is held as equipment and can be held as such, and the feed and upkeep is considered cost for that. And I'm not 100% sure if it falls under supplies or if it falls under equipment, because I know with the equipment, I think I had to put in there like fuel and lubrication and stuff like that, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't really remember if that fell under supplies or equipment. And then the other one is supplies, anything that is consumable, consumable plastics, fuel, some fuels, fertilizers, compost, seeds, nursery equipment, pots and stuff, small tools, everything. Like we got the no, that was put on the equipment. Our leafy green harvester from Farmer's Friend was put under equipment. But that could have a serial. That has a serial number. So be careful. Make sure you run that by your loan officer before you put it in your plan, just to make sure that they're willing to put that on there. The difference between those two is your equipment has a long-term payoff. Now, I think ours originally was 5 years, or no, 7 years. So we're talking big ticket items, tractors. You know, you're not going to be able to pay that stuff off soon. You're going to have to amortize that on your tax forms and everything, and that's going to take a while to pay off. Let's say, you know, all of your equipment's like $30,000. You know, they're not going to ask you to pay for that in the first year. That's just, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Even for the big guys that have, you know, acres and acres and acres of soybeans, you know, like they're taking out huge loans, but still you can't pay off a tractor in 1 year. It's possible, but not if you're a starting farmer like me and you're going to make all the mistakes and everything, kind of like the stuff that we did. On the other hand, the operating costs, they call it the operating cost, is a 1 year term. It's from January to January. If you submit your loan paperwork in June, kind of like we did, and you got disbursed in June, you owe them that money come January of the next year. Now you can get around that by doing an interest-only payment, but you can only do that like once for a loan, and that's what we did. So the operating cost is January to January, regardless of when it is dispersed, meaning they gave you the money. They can say, you know, hey, you need $30,000 in operating costs, and you had them disperse you $30,000. You owe them that on the January following your submission of disbursement. Now, for the equipment loan, it's 12 to 18 months from that point. So they say 12 to 18 because 12 is when they need the money. 18 is when you have no choice but to default. Now, we can get to that. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but know that your earliest you're going to have to pay for your equipment is split over 7 years, so 1/7 plus interest or whatever that they accrue. You'll owe that to them 12 months from the date of disbursement. You need $30,000 for equipment. You take it out in June. June of next year is your 12-month mark. You're going to have to pay 1/7 of that money plus interest, or else you'll be put on kind of the watch, and they'll be sending you notices in the mail, like they did for us, and they'll continue to ping you, and you need to make sure you're developing that relationship, because you don't want them to give a second chance to call you or a second chance to email you. Make sure you're reading your email. Make sure you're not a bonehead and ignoring email and ignoring problems that are coming up. Be honest and open with your loan processor, and they will bend over backwards like they did for us, to make sure that they've got everything done for you and that your farm can succeed. Because when you succeed, you pay them interest, they make money elsewhere, and they can give money to other people. That's all they want to do. These guys are, the majority of them are good, honest to goodness people that just want to see farmers succeed. And a lot of them, they're actually really excited about what we're doing here, because there's not a lot of people that are doing what we're doing here, specifically in our area. Next, a production plan. A production plan is really important, because it helps you get that equipment and supplies plan done. You don't know how many thousands and thousands of carrot seed you need if you don't have a production plan to tell you what you need to buy before you get dispersed your money. You're shooting in the dark. Do the best you can. I highly relied on Curtis Stone and Jean-Martin Fortier's books. A lot of the other market gardeners that I follow on YouTube and Facebook and everything. I got the best averages I could get. I shot really low as far as what we're going to make off of those beds. You know, I think Curtis Stone says, you know, off of a 25 or 50 foot bed, you can make anywhere from $500 to $800. In all those instances, I expected to get 5 instead of 8, just to make sure that I was shooting low, because it's, you know, it's always better to shoot low and then end up having a better year than you thought. And then you can adjust later on when you're more consistent with your production and what you're pulling off of your farm. Proposed income on all of your farm enterprises. Make sure this is going to be part of your loan processing paperwork, where they're saying, hey, how much money are you going to make? Because if you're not going to make X number of dollars more than what we're actually giving you, then we're just not going to give you the money. It just doesn't make sense. If you're going to take $30,000 of loan money out of them, and you're only going to make like $500 more than what you owe them, then it's not really a good deal for them. It's not a really good deal for them to do that, because you're not going to have any money to invest in your next year's production. So make sure you're doing your due diligence to put out a proposed income or proposed plan that shows that you're actually making a profit, and make sure to be conservative with that, because you don't want to say, hey, I'm going to be making $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 of production, because you're probably not in the first year, unless you're really lucky, you're really super dedicated. And I'm both of those. I'm lucky and dedicated, but I also planned everything I could and still kind of failed at that. It was kind of gut check, because there was some external things that happened, like I got injured. We had a very harsh 2018 beginning, and then we had the hurricane, right? So it all, you want to give yourself as much room to fail as possible, while also being positive about it and really planning very well. Also, list your farm with the USDA FSA. I don't know if this matters much if you're doing kind of like a backyard thing, or you're doing a hydroponic thing where you're not really using a lot of room on your farm. But just get with the Farm Service Agency. They'll tell you if you need to register your property as a farm or not, or if you even can. I believe that is a requirement for the loan process, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, check with your loan officer with that. Next thing I'm going to talk about is processing times. It's going to, like I alluded to before, it's going to take forever. I submitted my final paperwork in April timeframe. We did not get approved for disbursement until June or July. And mind you, we have like 6 loan processors for all of North Carolina. Our loan processors have like 20 something counties apiece. It's just ridiculous. And because we're a high agriculture state, that means a lot. They are busy, stressed out, and the better you can make their day easier, the better. That goes back to my question. Make sure you are asking them how you screw this up. If you make, like all the other guys say, if you make the process smooth for them, you're a personable, good character, and you're doing your good part, they're going to do their part to make sure that you don't fail, at least on the loan part and at least on the planning. And you can continue to ask them as many questions until a certain point as to where, you know, they really don't have any more answers to give you. And then you just got to kind of go with whatever else is relevant to your situation. When to submit. If I did not have to make money on our farm right away, I would submit I would probably submit the beginning of a year, use that first year kind of like how we did, but we had less of that year to do it. Or I would submit really late in the year so you can start off fresh using the prior year, practice your backyard garden, whatever, because there was a lot of learning. There was a big learning curve with us being in a high humidity, high bug, high disease pressure area. I killed a lot of plants. So you need to make sure that you're doing some experimentation so you know what you need to do. The prior year we lost the tomatoes, but the disease pressure wasn't as strong because I didn't have those plants there. We had some produce that we practice on, but it didn't work. It didn't work on scale coming up the next following year, along with a bunch of other, time frame problems. I got busy with work. My wife was going to school. We've got kids that we homeschool. It's just all the life things came into it, and I didn't pay attention to that specific disease, thinking it was something else, thinking it was pest pressure, thinking it was something else, instead of doing my due diligence and going to the FSA, going to experts in the tomato field and finding out, oh, wow, this is a pretty devastating tomato disease. Yeah, probably want to go a different route. But if I were you, I would submit, maybe August, September, October, start your process, get everything done and put in there. Obviously, this year was an anomaly because we had the shutdown and the FSA and the USDA was closed for like a month. That was a big issue for us because we had submitted some stuff to correct some of our problems, and we had to wait an entire month to figure out if, we were going to have a farm or not this coming year. So it makes a big difference when you submit. But for the most part, if you submit it within the timelines that you need to, the worst thing you can do is it can get delayed, but then you have the winter to plan in early spring to get everything going. So I would probably wait till the end of the year to submit so that you have your greatest amount of time to pay off your loan debt. And that'll keep you out of having to do restructuring processes like we had to do. Talked about the difference between equipment and operating loans, what you can purchase on the operating loans, strategies for dealing with problems. So the strategies for dealing with your problems with at least the FSA and the loan process is always give yourself the benefit of the doubt and give yourself as much room to fail, because you're going to fail, you're going to screw it up. And be conservative with your estimations, be conservative with your plans, so you're not really blowing all of your money all at once. And also, you're going to get to a point where your loan is processed and approved, and let's just say it's a flat $50,000 for a mixed amount of equipment and operating. Don't spend all your money up front. Ask them, when is the last point I can take money out? I can have money dispersed to me. So it's pretty much you get a bank account with the USDA. Then you send an email to your loan coordinator. And you say, hey, loan coordinator, I'm getting ready to pull the trigger on $10,000 of tractor and tractor equipment. They say, okay, we'll put in the order. They'll put in the order within 2 or 3 days, business days. Your money gets dropped into whatever bank account you gave them to put your money in. At that point, it starts accruing interest. So don't spend all your money up front, because a lot of the problems you're going to have are going to be money and problems that you didn't expect. So if you don't spend all your money up front, you hold that money in reserve with the USDA. It's not gaining interest. It's it's money that you don't owe yet. If the USDA keeps $30,000 of the $50,000, guess what? You only owe $20,000. So that's a big deal. But on the backside of that, don't wait too long, because what we had a problem with was we have an issue with use it or lose it. So we had nearly $4,000 of operating loan funds that we had allotted for broiler operation. We'd only allotted for 2 rotations of birds of money and feed and everything like that to be dispersed to us right up front, because we thought we were going to have the birds right away. Turns out it would have been a terrible idea to do it right away. It would have been a waste of money. We would have been spent hundreds of dollars on birds and feed that would have just gotten destroyed by the hurricane. And it was a good idea that we held on to it. The bad part was we lost $4,000, so we kind of have to make up for the whatever 1,500 birds that we had planned, or 500 birds that we planned to grow that year. We need to make sure that we somehow get that money from someplace else, either self-funding, or it's possible to get another operating loan, but I wouldn't if I were you. Don't disperse, like I said, don't disperse all your funds right away. With the equipment loan, I think there's a little bit longer time frame on that. But again, I know for a fact that if you do not ask for money to be dispersed within, I think it's like 60 or 90 days, they send you a letter or they call you and say, hey, are you going to use this money or not? Because they expect you to get it dispersed right away. But have a plan. Say, hey, no, we're waiting on a better deal on a walk-in cooler. We need to hold off on that. You just have to let them know so they don't go, okay, he doesn't need the money, and send it back to the USDA, which is not what you want to do, because then you lose then you lose it like we did. We lost about $4,000. On the backside, so what ended up happening was we got our loan issued to us in June of 2017. They were pretty upfront with the fact that they knew that I was not going to probably make a profit at the beginning of 2017 or by the end of 2017 to pay off the operating loan, the operating loan, because the equipment loan was 12 months away at that point. With the operating loan, what ended up happening was I possibly could have made that up, but again, planning. Don't try and buy a tractor and a bunch of accessories and a bunch of supplies for your farm when everyone else is. During the crunch time, I ended up waiting 2 months for my BCS tractor to come into the farm, which put us 2 months behind, which put us even more when you talk about, hey, I'm trying to till up a half an acre of pasture to prepare for garden beds when it's 95 degrees out and 100% humidity. Everything just stops at that point. And you'll end up pushing yourself almost to the brink like I did, trying to get it done when you probably could have taken a little bit slower approach to it. For the operating loan, what they can do is they can do a interest only payment, which pretty much means you lose 1 year of payment that gets put on the end and split up against the last. So if it's 7 years, you can't pay that first year. You only pay the interest on that money that you've accrued or you've dispersed for that year. And then the rest of that 1/7 payment gets split up between the other 6 payments. And that's good. If everything goes better for you guys than it did for us, you can kind of you can work that out. Cool. Made a couple mistakes. All right, cool. We have the $5,000 or $10,000, $12,000 or whatever to pay off by the end of next year, plus that next year's operating loan payment. Now, we didn't have both the operating and the equipment loan. So end of 2017, I hurt my back really bad. I literally was in a chair. I couldn't walk right. I was just laid up for probably 2.5 months, just barely doing anything. I mean, going out and looking at the chickens was a task for me. So that made a big difference on how much I was able to do during that time, and it took a lot out of me to even do anything during that winter. Also, I think it was the beginning of 2018. We had a really bad snowstorm, which really sucked. which really set us back a lot. I lost about four or so beds of Salanova, which is a pretty expensive seed, and a lot of value that was lost. So at the end of the day, if you can't pay your bills, you have a few options. You can go, I'm done. Take away all my stuff. More than likely, that's not going to happen because they're going to try and work with you to try and make it out, what they did for us. And I didn't quit, but we had some options at that point. You can quit, walk away. They sell all the stuff that you have. You end up owing them, or they end up writing you off, and you're never able to get a USDA loan again until you make good on that initial loan write-off. You can, I think the only other option is restructuring. So originally, like I said, the preconceived notions I had was all the money was 7 years, boom, we were good to go. That wasn't the case. Now, on the backside of that, when we weren't able to pay either our equipment and our operating cost loan due to extenuating circumstances, if you give them no reason as to why, like I just pulled a stupid and just sat drinking beer in my lazy boy and didn't try and make money, then they're probably not going to work with you. But I had a legitimate excuse. We had terrible weather and I hurt myself. So make sure you tell them that. And so what they end up doing is you still have the two loans that are separated. What they end up doing to a 15-year term, which is what they do when you are needing to stretch it out. Now we have the ability to do that. We have equity in our home. We had to put up our home as collateral, unfortunately. But what it does is it turns a $15,000 a year payment into a $3,000 a year payment, and you can actually go probably collect cans for the year to pay that off if you need to say, hey, the farming thing's not mine, but I really don't want to give it up. I want to keep trying. You can make that money up in off-farm jobs and everything like that. So it makes a big difference. It's a pretty in-depth process. It's a lot of paperwork. But if you want to reduce the risk to your family and your farm, it's worth doing. And it'll be a pretty painless process as long as you get it done in time. We submitted our paperwork right before the shutdown, and we're kind of like waiting with bated breath as to was it good enough? Did it get in there? Was it on time? Do we get penalized? Are we even going to be able to do it? But just make sure that you are paying attention to that, and then asking your farm loan officer all of your questions that you need to do that, because they're going to bend over backwards for you because they don't want to close down your farm. So that's about all I've got. If you want to ask any more questions underneath, I'm going to post this to Facebook and a couple of places. Go ahead and ask those questions down there, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll be honest with you on everything. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and make you think that I know everything. I thought I knew a lot. I found out that I didn't know as much as I needed to know. And now that I've gone through the trial, I kind of know a little bit more. But I just want to kind of help people not pull the trigger, or pull the trigger with a base of knowledge that allows them to make a educated decision on if this is the right thing for your farm right now, or if this is something you want to hold off on till later. So I really hope this helped. Again, Matt from Abundant Acres. I hope you have a good night.